Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks as always for making your way here, checking out the series. Please do hit that subscribe button. I put out 3 new interviews every single week, so it's a great way to keep up with all your favorite artists. I'm honored, excited today to be talking with Josh. You meet at 6, back with a brand new record called Truth Decay. Hello.
Hey, man, how are you?
Doing well over here. Congrats on the new album. Not only is it powerful, but it's fun. There are layers. I think it's got everything that I want out of an album from you guys.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And as I guess as I sort of read, that was kind of the idea behind this a little bit. Is that true? Because, when I read some of the things, press release and other interviews, you all, I guess, took the opportunity to look back and say, what makes a great You Me at 6 record? Is that the case? And if so, what had you look in that direction?
I think when we kind of got around the table and started working on some ideas for the record, it was on our radar that like Sucker Punch was the record before, was a record that was us 5 really like trying to flex our creative muscles and try and, I guess, prove to ourselves internally that we could make anything we kind of wanted to, whenever we wanted to, if that makes sense, have the license to do that. And which is great. We made like a pretty versatile record on that. But I think when we kind of got around to this one, we felt that we maybe lost a little bit, a sense of what we thought we were really good at and what we think that we can progress and make more and more like, like a quintessential You Me at 6 record. Like, what would that look like? So I guess we look back on some of our old stuff and our old material, and that kind of sparks a school of thought of revisiting that sound and that era of the band and like just pulling it into 2023. And then, we just sort of kind of ran away with it, to be honest, and wanted to make like a kind of, I don't know, a record that we have made, say, the second, third, fourth albums that we've had, but then, just kind of reimagine it now and with all the experience we've got of recording and I guess songwriting and stuff, and just see what that would feel like. And it felt good, so we ran with it.
Yeah. Well, if you've been a fan for a while, that's, because I don't know, I think that's a question of band, whether or not they wrestle with it. It's a decision you make, with every single record. Do you cater, may not be the right word, but do you cater to an old sound, or do you try something new? But for a fan, and I'm sure you've got these bands for yourself too, like every now and then you go, I kind of wish they just do a record like that again. Like, does it feel like that?
Yeah, totally. And I think, it's interesting you say that, because it was a very conscious decision to make like a fan driven record, if that makes sense. Like, we wanted to make an album that the last few we've made have been very much us just doing what we want to do, how we want to do it. And we were lucky in the sense that we've kind of cultivated a culture around our band within our fan base that they allow us to make left turns and support it. But with this record, we're just like, if you're like a mega fan of You Me at 6, what would your favorite You Me at 6 record sound like? And we just kind of went for that. So yeah, I feel that, but also at the same time, I feel like if we had just made records that sounded the same for the last 15, 18 years, then we probably would be a band now, if that makes, we probably would have died off like most people have. So I think it's been good that we've, in our own way, and I don't measure You Me at 6's success or our ambition or our rhetoric is ours. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not worried about what other people are doing in terms of, comparing. So I feel like for us, this we felt like we've been progressive, but this felt like still a step forward whilst maintaining the spirit and the DNA of those records that we were kind of trying to almost revisit, and that era of the band that we wanted to revisit. So yeah, I think that we probably made a record that existing fans will be really into. And I think there's this interesting time with our scene, which has kind of had a bit of a renaissance again. In the sense that, you know, some of the big bands have come back with records, which always helps an alternative scene when like the gatekeepers are in their stride. And I think, you know, there's been some festivals, some lineups that have really, I don't know, it's like re-energized the scene. And so I feel like it's even more perfect timing for our band to be making a record that is kind of well in touch with our roots of the band that we have always been, but the band that we were when we first started getting notoriety and started, you know, gaining momentum and some success. So I feel like all of it's just come together at a really kind of, yeah, a really interesting time. So
yeah, and that can't be overlooked. I mean, the sound, the scene back in the zeitgeist, as you were saying, with some legends kind of pulling themselves back to there, but also this new class coming up and they're waving that flag as well. I don't know if you can speak to this, but because I don't know, I guess I got my opinions, but what is it about that scene and that sound that made it stick around when so many others haven't? You know, what is it? Why is that one so special?
um I think it brings the I think it brings for me now in my 30s, when I listen to that kind of music, it resurfaces a lot of great memories. And I think that is something that doesn't matter how much time passes, I think it has that effect with a lot of people that are into that and into these kind of bands and this kind of music. Um, I don't know. I just think there was it was just a very is and was a very kind of potent kind of time for alternative music. You know, like the Warped Tour era, at least the 21st century Warped Tour era, was kind of like pretty much all the big bands that are around now came from that. So I think maybe it's like the fact that there was like this hub which everyone kind of came from, um, that really strengthened it. I don't know. It's tough to put your finger on it. I think it's kind of, as everything involved in music, it always goes back to the listeners and the audience and why they like it. And so you probably have to ask them. I'm probably not the best because I've kind of like drifted in and out of the scene of like, you know, I think that's been reflected on our records. It's only really been over the last sort of year that I've kind of really reconnected, I guess, with the music that I grew up on. So there's loads and loads of really cool and exciting new bands that I'm discovering, which have been around for like 5-6 years that I haven't had my finger on the pulse and I haven't really been aware of what's been going on. But yeah, I think it's a cool thing, man. I think we're like most things, there's strength in numbers, and I think that, you know, for any scene, for any genre to really flourish, there needs to be a lot of bands hitting the right notes at the right time, but also like coming together and doing cool shit together. And I think there was a period of time where guitar bands and alternative scene became quite territorial and like, nah, this is my plot of land, like stay away. You know, a fear of like missing out or losing out on opportunities. They had to be quite territorial and standoffish. So I think that shifting and people being again more inclined to to go together has been pretty interesting as well.
Yeah. So it looks like, you know, when you said you made a conscious decision as a band to go that direction, then did that immediately direct the songwriting? Because I didn't even have to hear the song. You look at the title, it says God Bless the 90s Kids, and you go, well, this fits the picture.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. We were just again just conscious of it was probably the first time in a handful of years where we knew exactly the record we wanted to make before we even made it. So I guess to have that kind of tone of voice and I guess that soundscape and, you know, just I guess like a strong gut feeling about which direction we're going to go at all times. There wasn't like any sort of head scratching, you know, like it was always kind of, we're all very in sync. And God Bless the Nights Kids is kind of like the poster boy for the whole album. You know, it's like, this is what this record is. And it's just it's just a culmination of what I think all the great moments of early U-6 records in one song. So yeah, it's one we're definitely excited about for sure.
Yeah. And then to play around, I guess, with the decades a little bit on my side, when I heard Mixed Emotions, which, by the way, that top line vocal is so good. It's so
Thanks,
catchy.
man.
But that's the one, you know, as we're talking about the early 2000s, even the 90s, I heard that one. I was like, and this one feels a little bit like an 80s influence, just a little bit at least. Where were you guys with that one? If you can kind of pinpoint that type of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think the 80s were ever on our radar when we were making it, but that's cool that that's kind of how you've digested it. I guess that's music, right? It's totally, when you hear it, you kind of can inhabit it any way you want. And I guess that's the beauty of music, is that it's constantly open to interpretation. But yeah, I don't think we've ever really, maybe not knowingly, been tapping inside the 80s as like a form of influence. But what's interesting actually about that is when we were putting that song together as a demo and it got to the middle eight, the second verse, Dan kept on saying that the melody reminded him of like an Elton John song. So he was really gassed. And I think that's probably about as 80s as it got. And I guess also like the reference to Lionel Richie dancing on the ceiling, but other than that,
it's infiltrating it just a little bit, even maybe subconsciously. That's what it sounds
just a little bit of this, yeah.
You talked a bit about that song too, and about, you know, it being about the band and communication in the band. And I don't know, I shouldn't walk on that answer, because I'd like to hear a little bit about that as well. I think that's important that you are writing about that, because it's not just talking about, as we're saying, this scene. I mean, you're opening those curtains directly, it looks like, to the inner workings of the group.
Yeah, totally. I think it's, you know, I think if you ask any group of men how they would rate their communication on a scale of 1 to 10 over a period of, you know, many years, they'd probably give it a 0, or, you know, a 2 or a 3. We're not as emotionally mature, or we're not compelled to like be like transparent with one another, or to confide in one another in the ways that, say, my sister would with her friends, or my girlfriend would with hers. Like, I think so then you kind of add growing from being literally kids to young men to now blokes in their 30s, and doing it all kind of under albeit not a global serious microscope, but a microscope nonetheless, with like being in the public eye, and then also still trying to understand who we were as individuals, that then obviously who we then would be, or what we could be, or whom we could be as a collective. And like growing up, at times it was turbulent and very difficult to understand how to I guess how to communicate fundamentally, but how to be there for one another, and then also how to manage our expectations of one another in those moments that were difficult. So that song is really about like kind of just, you know, challenging the stigma, I guess, of toxic masculinity, but also it really just is about trying to be more accountable and more informed about how you I guess how you negotiate those situations, because no one gives you a handbook for life. You have to learn, unfortunately, more often than not, by making mistakes, or, you know, taking L's, as they say. And yeah, I think just a group of 5 complex fellas growing up all together and going around the world, and as I said, fucking up and all trying to grow up at the same time is always complicated. So I think that's really what mixed emotions is all about. It's just kind of like putting your hand up and going, yeah, I hear you, I get it.
Yeah, the whole band dynamic is so interesting because, we have friends throughout our life that we might be close with, but then we all drift away and we become different people. It doesn't matter if you all become different people. You're sort of bound in this to figure it out, and multiple people all at once. It's really commendable to any band who can make it. These days, are you the type that still hang out with each other outside of the band, or is that the dividing line now?
No, we've been. It's often been said by people that have been on tour with us. Other bands will be like, we move as a unit at all times. It's very rare. It's very, very rare that there'll be an excursion on tour or a night out or a day off or whatever that we won't all be as a unit. I think if you do it right, the people that you're on tour with become your family more than anything else. And I think a lot of the time, you need to be around people that, are willing to understand you and you're willing to understand them. And I think that's a lot of the time with breakdowns and internally with bands, and especially the kind of framework of like a touring dynamic. The reason they become, unstuck is that they just don't care. And then it's more at that point, it's about the ego or the money or bigger shit that's happening in their life, family, friends, partners, whatever, that, they would rather be there than they would be, with the band. So I think U-Music, it's always been our longevity, which was the thing that we were more or most keen on preserving. We didn't really care. So we want to be successful, but I think it depends again how you measure success. Like, we measure it by how close are we, how long have we been going for, have we been able to be adaptable, and have we got through tough shit together? Like, that's how we measure where we're at. And you put into the mix that we actually enjoy being around one another and we enjoy making music together, then it's a pretty cool place to be. And undoubtedly there's times where I want to throw them down the stairs or whatever, but that's the family. That's you piss each other off. And there's times where we go a couple of weeks or a month or so and we're at home, because we don't live all in the same places, where we're not living each other's pockets in that sense. But there's not really a day that goes by that we're not in communication. So yeah, we're pretty close.
Yeah, I do love hearing that. I like the way that it's all held out. Then you guys have done this your way the whole time. On the new record, of course, the favorites. I was wondering if I was going to bring this up. My wife's a big Vampire Diaries fan. She's watched it multiple times, and there it was as I was researching this, and she was watching that final episode, and there's your song, "Take on the World," and it hit me, like, there's a song. I mean, any of your songs, but that you wrote it with whatever in mind, and now here it is for so many people, and it means that it's become to mean that. And we were kind of talking about this at the beginning of the middle of the interview, where we're saying what it comes to represent to you. But when you get something so strongly tied to an image as it is in that final episode, does that change the song for you as well?
I guess it depends on, like, and I mean this respectfully, but I guess it depends on how aware you are of the show. So like, there'll be some people that you're completely right, that like the image they formed of the band is based on a TV show that they love, and I guess the placing of that song, and I guess I've never watched the show as in like from start to finish. I've seen the clip where our song is in, and to my understanding, I might be wrong, but it's quite like it's kind of rounding up basically what people have been watching for X amount of times. So it's quite a significant and poignant moment in the program. So I think, like with any like cult audience, cult fan base, or cult classic, like what the Vampire Diaries is, then there's that attachment to it. But it's interesting because I don't think I've ever met a Yumi at Six fan that has said to me they discovered us through the show. But yet there must be a correlation between the success of the song and the amount that it's been streamed, or the amount of units it's sold, or whatever, and that. I'd find it difficult to understand it, if not, you know what I mean? Like, why that? But I just think for me, it's a total honor, and like we're not like we haven't really had that too many times, and it's definitely not at that level. So I think it's I feel very grateful that that we soundtracked that moment in the history of that show, and ultimately had that opportunity to reach that kind of wider audience. But it's, I guess, it's just not something that is, I guess, because it's not been brought up that often, or as I said, I don't really have like fans of that show hit me up every day telling me about it, that I kind of like forget it was even on there. And then when you bring it up like now, it's like, oh yeah, it's a pretty big deal that that song was used. And I think, actually, if I remember correctly, when we got the email about it, it was like, I think because the member on the sync team at the time, the label on that sent the email, like they really downplayed it. And like, so do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't really understand like the gravity of like what it could be. But like, if it had been when I was growing up and like, I don't know, fucking on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the final ever episode that happened, or like, I don't know, the shows that I watched growing up, like the OC and stuff like that, I would have been like, fuck, I can't believe that song is, we're on that. So it's ultimately, dude, like, it's just cool that what a song that I wrote in a basement of this guy's house. I mean, I wrote that song in like an afternoon with this guy called Ian Archer. He used to play in a band called Snow Patrol. And we wrote a bunch of songs, and we were just sort of pissing about. And then, like, me and him just wrote the song literally in what felt like an hour and a half. And I didn't actually show it to the lads for ages, because at one point I was trying to get it to Ed Sheeran because I thought it was gonna like had the chance to like be an Ed Sheeran song. And I know we took it to Calvin Harris's management company because we just signed them. And I was like, oh, I could imagine this being like a dance banger. And then I remember our manager at the time goes, I think now we can rule out Ed Sheeran and Calvin Harris. Now would be a good time to show the band. And when I showed it to them, they're like, I can't believe you've not shown us this, and you wrote it 6 months ago. What the fuck? It's like, it was really funny. So it's cool that it's going to do what it's done.
Yeah, well, as someone who's seen that show peripherally a lot around my house, it is a very big moment, and one that's going to live that way for a while. And Josh, I'll come back around. Truth Decay again. I had so much fun listening to this record. I didn't even bring up like deep cuts and no future and dopamine. I mean, it's just song after song after song. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about it today.
Oh, you're very welcome, man. Thank you for your time, pal. Appreciate it.
And thanks to my guest. Also, thanks to you for checking out the episode in the series. Before you get out of here, hit that subscribe button. Again, you get 3 brand new interviews every single week. New one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at right here on YouTube, or of course anywhere in podcast land, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, NPR, or WFPK.org as well. A great way to keep up with your favorite artists and discover new ones as well. Then after that, actually head over to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, bonus interviews, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern at WFPK.org. Consequence has your music and film news. You can also find me on the social media spots, Facebook, Instagram, mostly on Twitter. All three of them, the address is at Kyle Meredith. Do hope you like and follow along. That does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.